How do you stay up to date with the youth and young adults, like the trends that are happening right now, to be able to stay relatable to them?
Totally. I think spending time with them.
Yeah.
like being in school. I think one of the things I always would make sure I'm doing is never too busy to go and be in a school, be a part of that. I think just being in and around it. I think obviously you can go to Google and be like, what's current? That's great, but you actually don't catch.
Does that actually work?
Yeah, people do it. People do it. Go to whatever, find out words. What are you saying now? You're probably going to get something they're not saying right now, right?
Go the opposite.
But I think actually being in and amongst it, you actually catch the flavour, and it's more than just words. There's a flavour. And it's really easy because it's so quick. There's so much change.
Yeah.
So I've got to be constantly thinking, cool, what's the current flavour? Because it probably has changed from 6 months ago. Yeah. Even in the high school, it's just constantly moving. So, we've both been chaplains, right, Mitch? And so you can sense that, hey, when there's a change of what's cool.
Even when you're in a school and between year 7 to year 12, every grade there is a different point of relevance.
Yeah.
And there are some commonalities, but it's amazing when you see it all in one package, the spectrum of what is cool and what's on trend. It's constantly...
So is that because it's changed, or because it's a different thing, relates to a different age?
I think it's both. I think they're always changing.
Yeah.
But it's
always moving.
But also, there's just slight variances. What happens in year 6, say, is a massive jump to what happens in year 7 when you enter high school. That's probably one of the biggest transition moments for youth in terms of what's cool. You can change even the way they walk and hold themselves. It's amazing to look at. And then year 8, suddenly they're just not the young ones. And then year 9 and 10 is probably the
real defining.
The real defining
where
one.
it gets real interesting.
Yeah. And then year 11 and 12, they're becoming adults. So their mind space is changing and their head space is changing too.
So what do you do with all that change as youth and young adults?
Yeah, well,
leaders.
I think we have to be aware. Yeah. Awareness is key. I don't think we have to try too hard. Yeah. I think it's really
distasteful.
It's ugly when we get real try hard.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm still very much me.
Yep.
So I'm not trying to be 15.
Good.
Because that makes kids ooh, who's this old guy
creepy,
trying to be 15?
Awkward.
Yeah,
creepy more.
Creepy, yeah, that's right. That's right. So, but I think what we do then is we identify influences.
Yeah, okay.
So for me, I'm thinking, cool, there's a whole bunch of islanders. So we got all these islanders coming to youth. And so I'm not trying to be
an island.
a footy player, right? A big, I'm like this, they're 12 and twice my size, got a beard down here. I'm hi, So I'm not trying to be that, but then I've found an influencer, so I win them, build a relationship with them, and they actually end up growing and winning all these people. So I think identifying influences, for me, it's an awareness though.
Yeah.
So if I'm just not aware, you start to just get outdated really quick. But then in the same breath, I'm not trying too hard to be something I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm empowering other people to be that.
I think as well, young people today, I think more than ever, can read fake a mile away.
Yeah.
Because they're sold so much, so often on social media, technology, they're constantly being sold things.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy, and that's, I think, where the value for authenticity has come from, is that there's over this sense of bombardment of sales, and so often what happens though is youth pastors or leaders in general can try and copy other youth pastors. He's cool, he's funny, young people love him, so I'm going to try and be like him. But they've missed the point that young people don't like him because of why he's him. They like him because he's being him. And so the importance is actually I'm just going to be myself. And so when I took on the chaplain role after Alex, I was trying to be very intentional that I'm not going to just try and be what Alex was. I was going to be what I am.
It's really good.
Do you think that the pendulum has swung too far in some churches and some certain contexts that the church is no longer holy, like because we've tried to become so relevant in some areas.
Well, if God shows up, then he feels comfortable in that house. So he decides at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And if they, as long as they allow room for him, give him permission, he'll come. So just if it gets too structured, too humanistic, that's when I think we stop allowing him to move and do what he does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there's a pastor watching and they're thinking, I need to make some changes, I just don't know where to start. Well, I know we've covered a whole heap of time.
He knows it's coming. He knows it's coming.
Now my brain's working.
I know we've covered a whole heap of different areas, but what's most important? Like, what do you think has the most impact? Like, where do they start? I mean, maybe they're, on a practical note, churches have limited resources. You know, like, do they start with the worship? Like, you know, they might have a really dodgy drum kit that's really loud, or they've got those fluoro mic covers.
They're probably better to do less well.
From the 1990s still. It's like, where do they start?
It's great. It's good to do less well, even if you strip out the drum kit and have a great acoustic and a great vocals or whatever.
Less is more.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't try to impress, or don't try too hard. I think definitely where they buy clothes, stuff like that. No, just kidding.
I think that's a good point.
Totally though.
Yeah.
I think you start with yourself, right?
That's true.
Like if you're the pastor, if you're the leader, I think it's everything. The hard reality is it probably does flow from the leader. So making the changes, if you want to see change around you, can't start pointing the finger there if you haven't pointed it here first, right? So I think
That's good.
that'd be my thought.
Yeah, and without it becoming, I'm trying to be a younger person.
Yeah.
You know, when that thing, that whatever that is, you don't try to be younger.
The best version of
the
yourself.
best version of you, and I think that is presentable, and you know, try to be as healthy and fit as you possibly can, because I think those things do count. They're not everything by any stretch of the imagination. I think if I was to answer one key thing to that is start looking younger. Start looking younger. Start looking.
Got some great cream. We've started a brand of
use moisturiser. Cut the ear hairs.
Yes, amen.
Amen on that one. Is start connecting with younger people. Start looking and connecting with, and not just hanging out is trying to be cool, but investing in the next generation. It took me a while to get to that.
That's great.
So
next generation.
you start investing in them, seeing them, and I know for Bernie and I, we love hanging out with young people, not because it makes us feel young, but because we feel like we're investing in that, and I think that keeps us somewhat relevant and young and the sound. And I think for us, when we're raising our kids, we're very much like that too. We wanted to keep the bond strong, but also to keep the conversation open.
Yeah.
So at our dinner table, it would never be, I'm the father and my opinion. It was like, and we'd ask questions at the dinner table. And if they had a thought, we'd say, okay, talk about that. What's the deal? And let them have an opinion. Let them talk, because first of all, it helps them develop their ability to communicate and have an opinion and to be somewhat self-actualized. I'm sounding like a psychologist now. But I think similarly in leadership, we tend to think as I get older, I know everything, but we don't. I think we need to keep connecting, talking start conversations. I mean, if I was the older pastor, I would probably pick 6 to 10 young people and have a meeting with them every couple of weeks.
That's great.
And with no agenda, just to chat, talk, and ask a lot of questions.
And what's distinctive about you and Bernie is you do have a young, almost timeless spirit because you love the next generation. And there are a few people that I could say that of, but it's not common. I almost wish you could lay hands on everyone of your generation and impart it, and you do in your content and what you're speaking. But it's invaluable because if we don't close the bridge between the generations, the impartation doesn't happen. The wisdom and the buoyancy and the energy needs to mix.
Probably a scripture that changed my life the most on that point, random scripture, it's the last verse of the Old Testament. So I'll turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I bring a curse. In other words, revival is in the connection of generations. But it's got to be at a heart level.
Right.
And I think when you see young people, when I see young people, I want to love them. I want to reach out to them. It's not like, and I don't know why people don't have that, but anyway, but I think then you get the heart of the young person to you, then, because it's the breaking of the end of a generation that stops the flow of God.
Right.
Because it's not one generation, it's 2, 3, 4, 5 generations.
Right.
And I think the enemy comes in and brings generational gap, whatever.
Like a big brother jealousy or a feeling threatened.
Whatever, exactly. And I think if we keep it flowing, and I think the older generation, if I can speak on behalf of us older guys, is to not feel threatened, but to empower.
Yes.
Empowering and non-threatened down, upward honour and respect. I think if those two things mix, then we get, and I think that actually creates a relevant church. So.
Totally.
When I first arrived, I was 15, so I didn't grow up in church. And actually, the very first person I met from C3 was Josh, Kelsey. He was the chaplain at the school I went to. And I would say one of the major things coming into a church without immediate family around me was the sense of being knitted to the older generation. And that was purely because of, honestly, because of Pastor Mark and Bernie. And I think that for me, if I was to look back in hindsight over my last 15 years, would be singularly what knitted me not just to a youth ministry or a youth pastor, but to the house of God. Was not the youth pastor or my peers, but actually the generation above me.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it wasn't relevance, you know, because there's a massive generational gap, you know. So it's not like, oh, that was
Don't rub it in.
no massive.
Particularly in this case.
90 years.
I was 15, but you know, I think it, like you're saying, it's not about age or ethnicity or anything like that. It was the Christ factor, you know, which I think is beautiful.
How do you think the next generation could do the respect thing well? I feel like you do it well, and it seems you had a revelation.
Yeah, sure.
But if you could coach your generation.
That's a good question.
I think it is a humility thing. I think it's a heart thing that we have to just decide. I was raised, I think, quite well in this, and I was always taught by my parents to honour and respect and to listen. And I know when I didn't, they would tell me I didn't, and I'd make sure I went and corrected it. So I think it is a coaching thing and a real practical thing. But I think it is a honour thing and a humility thing, that we don't just assume that they're outdated and that we've got all the answers and we know what's right, but actually really just stop and go, actually, we need what they've got.
I think as well, like, even biblically, being stewards. Commonly, like, there's so much stardom can creep into church life. So for young guys, being on the platform, being on the pulpit is exciting. But sometimes I think helping young guys catch, actually, it's not about being entitled, it's about being entrusted. And so, like, if we can teach young people to look after what you've been given, and actually be a steward, knowing that, okay, like, it's not my youth ministry, it's not my connect group, I'm looking after it right now, but actually it belongs to the person there, and then that belongs to, in my case, Pastor Phil. So I'm here for a season stewarding, and I think that really puts you in a different mindset. I do think sometimes it's underrated. Sometimes people who are good stewards are underrated, and the guy or the girl that's really flashy gets a lot of attention, but the steward is a person that God ultimately is honouring. They get more because they've looked after what they've got. So people who are pushing for what's next, to me, I'm like, well, show me what you do with now, and then we'll know what's next. Rather than like the push for give me next. And I think that culture, to youth pastors, I'd say create a culture of stewardship.
That's great.
And you'll find that people are a lot more, there's room for more honour and less entitlement.
Yeah, wow. Wow, great. Are there any final thoughts that anyone has to encourage pastors and leaders and team leaders and service pastors and everyone watching to create a relevant culture?
I mean, I think that people just need to feel like they belong. That is the cry of the human soul. So if we can build community, we're looking after people. You actually don't need a resource of money or anything to do that. That's just intentionality.
Anyone else?
People have fun. Dear Lord, have fun. Laugh.
Seriously.
Seriously. Laughter bonds people, you know, like in a service when you laugh together.
Yeah.
That makes you relevant straight away. Because everyone laughs.
That's great.
Everyone can relate to fun. And so I think if you're boring, stop it.
So memes are not off the table, is what you're saying.
Memes. We're all about memes.
Awesome. I just needed someone to endorse my
Yeah. Feel free. Yeah, feel free.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Emma.
Appreciate it. Hey, we hope you enjoyed it. We hope it was helpful. And if it was, send it round to your team. Send it to anyone who it might be able to help. And thanks so much for tuning in.